Let's see, what can I tell you about my business experience? It covers about 15 years. Say I started
You
everything
look
off.
younger than that.
Yeah. I started when I was 24. Actually, they say traveling is really important when you're young. If you ever get a chance to travel again in this world, I hope we all do. But it does give you kind of experiences and opens your eyes. And even if I came from a background of I'm American, I grew up in the U.S.
Seriously, I didn't notice your accent.
Yeah, and
I thought you were like, I don't know, Irish or something like that. Or
and
French even.
Yeah, maybe a little bit French. We could talk like this if you think it's better. But no, I went over to Vietnam and I lived there for about 8 months and I taught English. And I realized that that's not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I also realized that I was in a country of entrepreneurs and everybody in that country was doing something to get by. And even if you were destitute and you couldn't do anything, you could always go and buy lottery tickets and stand on the side of the dusty road all day long and wave them like this, and people would stop and buy lottery tickets from you. And that just kind of amazed me to meet all these people, and they'd give me 2 cards, the company they were working for and the business that they just started, doing the same exact thing, but with a slightly different take on the logo and everything. So I kind of said to myself, wow, all these people can succeed and are just like this enterprising country. I kind of brought that back with me to France. That was probably the most profound impact of living there. And I decided I had an idea for a business that I wanted to start. It was a translation company. And I usually tell people, it's really important that you have a unique selling proposition. It's something that you hear all the time. And that was something that really I had an idea and I kind of did some research and nobody was doing what I was doing. And I offered to do this type of translation for people, and they're like, "Oh, that's a really good idea."
But what type of translation was that?
So the translation was typically, it's really funny in translation. You have 2 schools of thought. You have the Russians who believe that Russian is so hard to understand that only a native speaker of Russian could translate a work in Russian into another language in order to understand really the essence of what's being said. Whereas in a lot of other countries, they say, no, you have to be a native speaker of the language you're translating into in order to really make it poetic and beautiful. So you have this kind of this struggle. Yeah, to and from, like which language should you translate into and from? Should you be doing it both ways? So the general consensus is you should always translate into your native language. However, that means that you're going to be missing out on some subtleties in the source language, because a language encompasses so much more. It's all about culture and nuances, anecdotes and histories and things that you just wouldn't know unless you grew up in a place in a specific time. So my idea was, well, let's have a team translation. Let's have a native speaker of French and a native speaker of English work on the translation together, so that they can talk back and forth and kind of solve those small little problems. And the greatest, there's several stories about that, but one of them that comes to mind in particular recently that I had to deal with was, there was a little bit, it's a kind of a beauty and cosmetics translation we're working on. And I was revising the work from a colleague, and it mentioned something about Australian women and how they, conceive of their bodies. And the French was something like, victime de la mode, tel est son nom de code. Okay, which roughly translates as a fashion victim. That's her code name, right? Okay, nothing really special about that, except when you read it and that the translator was a great translator, but she didn't really have this particular cultural reference. That's a song lyric from a song that was released in the 1990s by a rap person called MC Solar, which means that the person writing that to appeal to French women who are targeted by this particular marketing text about beauty products and whatever would immediately know, like, okay, they're making a reference to this artist, this song that was played on the radio all the time in the 90s. And so it wasn't necessarily something that you would have to literally translate. And maybe you should think about, okay, do we really want to maybe we should look for a a song lyric from another song, but we should completely change that translation. So that's where having these two people from these two cultural backgrounds was really helpful. So coming back to the original thing, the unique selling point, that's so important when you're starting a business, and you have to kind of identify that, what makes you different. You can, differentiate yourself with your values, with a different take on what you're doing, with a specialization. You need to make sure that you are like the first of many, or the best of something like that, the first or the best of many, or there's one other qualificative, so that you can kind of say that you are unique in what you're doing.
A marketing guy I know, he says that's called the onliness factor. So you're the only one, the onliness factor. So that's also like a niche. But starting in a niche doesn't matter actually which branch or which sector you work, but starting in a niche is quite difficult, especially as an American in France or in maybe the south of France. Were you already a native speaker or a native homegrown French speaker as well? Or
yeah, I mean, that was a particular advantage that I could use being in France, because I was in close proximity with my clients, and that's another good thing. You want to be close to your clients.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, I would say, French people who need English translations into English. At the time, I was CEO, right? Chief Everything Officer, in charge of marketing, in charge of sales, in charge of production. It was all over the place. And so being close to your clients is important and helpful, because you can network with them, and I was few in a field of many, whereas my French colleagues who were translating into French, their biggest clients are over in the US. So not having that proximity is difficult. But that comes to another kind of point that I'd like to bring up and share with everybody, is that you have to be very careful, like really identify good clients and not try and get all of the clients in the world. And that was kind of the struggle that I had in the beginning. I was getting lots of clients because they wanted a native English speaker. And, I was, putting up American flags everywhere, like we Americans love to do, on my website and stuff. So people would realize they're getting the true, genuine American in their translation. But in the end, I was getting lots of small one-shot clients, right? And it took me about 3 months after starting my business to realize, wait a minute, the real client that I need was actually a translation agency that would then be sending me work regularly, and not just small jobs, but we're talking big jobs like 2,000, 3,000 euros a pop for 1 or 2 weeks at a time. And it was regular. It was on a monthly basis. And so I kind of said, okay, wait a minute, figure out where your best clients are, and then try and replicate how did you get those clients, where they are, where can you find them, where can you meet more of them? And so not long after that, I went to a meeting of the translation agencies, of all the CEOs of the translation agencies in France. And I swear I must have been like the only kind of upstart young, I'm like 25, I've got a mustache and whatever. I show up there and everybody's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, well, you guys are all my potential clients. So I wanted to meet. And I met them, and I sat down with them. And one person I sat next to at the networking lunch, a round table. And we just started talking, and, wasn't talking so much about business. I told her my unique selling proposition. She liked it. We had a drink at the end of the conference, and then she started sending me work. A company started sending me work. 3 years later, I sold my company to them, my client database, and I used that money and time off to travel around the world, do a huge, massive project. That's a whole nother story in my life. And then I came back, and I'm still working with them today. And I probably have done, several hundred thousands of euros just from going to the right spot and meeting the right person. And that's it.
By the way, you talked there about your experience in Vietnam. And I'm curious about this, because many times we think that entrepreneurship is, let's say, more, an exit way. When you are talking about countries that are not well developed. So when we think about Western world, we think that there is a lot of support for entrepreneurship, but the true entrepreneurs are the ones in countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, and places like this, that either you do something for your life or basically you might have some food issues, let's say. So do you think that people in Vietnam are more entrepreneurs, or they are survival entrepreneurs than in the Western world? Because you have the experience from both markets, let's say.
Yeah, I think there's definitely the socio-political context and kind of the support network that you have. I see it in France, people who lose their jobs in France and they have maybe 2 years of benefits to kind of to use until they have to get a new job or start something. And several of them, they justify it. They say, well, I've been paying taxes into this system for so long, and so these are my rights that I have. And they're kind of just relaxed. There's no real rush because
no pressure.
Really getting no pressure. So let's wait, let's ride it out, and spend some time at the beach and relax. And that's kind of the situation that that we've developed in France, and that safety net. And who knows, I'm not here to criticize it or anything, but there's definitely less of a sense of urgency to get out and do something right away. And I think what they've tried to do, particularly in France, is say things like, okay, well, if you want to start a business now, today, instead of getting your payments every month for the next 2 years, we're going to give you a lump sum. We're going to give you like 30,000, 40,000 euros, and you can go ahead and you can start your business. And some people do that. And I think that's a good thing. I think.
But it's funny that you also have a different sense of risk. So I have this idea from my experience. I don't know if that's yours. That in the Western world, people have a sense that they risk much more if they are entrepreneurs than in countries that are underdeveloped. So in those, there is no risk. You have nothing to lose. But in reality, you have much more to lose in underdeveloped countries than you have in a Western world. What do you think?
You have much more to lose in a developed country, or in
no, there is the perception of what you have to lose. That, in my view, in the Western world, people have this perception that they might lose much more. And the reality that is
sure.
There are different
definitely. And I think there's just in general, it's an uphill battle. I don't know how it is in Portugal and the Netherlands. I think maybe the business climate is a little bit more friendly. In France, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of, I've been here for a long time, and everybody just kind of talks about how rigid the labor laws are, how this stuff, it doesn't give you a lot of room to maneuver. There's taxes. It's all these stuff that is just kind of like saying, I think it's more of trying to put up barriers. And the government has done a lot of things to kind of reduce those barriers. And we're seeing it with, they kind of simplified it for people to start their own business, and they just do like standard deductions. So before you had to, keep accounting and deduct everything. And now it's just a standard. I made 100 euros. Okay. I declare I made 100 euros, and the government takes out 25%. That's it. No questions asked if you spent money. So it gives a lot of flexibility for people to test out ideas and to go ahead and do things. And they've made it so that you can also kind of keep getting your unemployment benefits, because frankly, there's very few people who, once they have their job and their salary, they kind of stay there because it's a comfort zone thing. We all like to be in our comfort zone, and you get a monthly salary and maybe you're just happy with what you're doing, and that's great. And so not many people leave that. And when they do, that's a huge thing. When they leave that, there's lots of issues with getting housing in France where we live. If you don't have an indefinite contract, like indefinite term contract for your work, it's really difficult to get an apartment, to rent an apartment, to buy an apartment, just because the bank, they're not sure. They're a little bit scared that maybe you're not going to, you're not going to be able to afford to continue paying the payments. People don't want to rent to you. So there's there's a lot of barriers
To become an entrepreneur, right?
to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my situation, I'll give you the facts. When I came back from Vietnam, I didn't, I'd been married for a few years. We had been living in France. I came back with no contract whatsoever. I'm starting a business. And we were fortunate because one of my old neighbors had an apartment that he would rent, and he rented to us without having any, showing any contract studies. Like, look, I trust you. I know that you're going to pay and whatever. And so we were able to rent an apartment. Otherwise, it would have been just like a massive struggle to get housing.
And John, you've been traveling a lot, right? Within JCI, we have seen each other, well,
everywhere.
So, as entrepreneur, you have also seen many countries. Maybe as JCI member then, so you were for conference, but I know you were always very active, and not only during the leisure programs, but also during the official programs, and be meeting a lot of people. When you look from a business point of view, of your entrepreneurship point of view, which countries in Europe, let's keep it to Europe, are really that you've seen, wow, amazing. Actually, I would like to live there maybe when I was really, well, you're really an entrepreneur, but actually maybe you want to live there. What have you seen those things?
I'll tell you some experience from traveling around Europe. One country that really stands out when you talk about wow is Estonia. Yeah. And I'm sure you're aware of everything that they've done with digital residency, and they're just kind of like 10 years ahead of everybody else. So that's a pretty amazing place to go and to look into if you're starting a business and you're kind of a nomad business, maybe. So one place to look into. I must say, when I went to Albania a number of years ago, so this was back in like 2007. No, 2009. So it was still, this is like 11 years ago. It wasn't really a hot spot or anything. I noticed a few years after that it became the #1 destination on the Lonely Planet. But still, it's like, one of the poorest countries ever in Europe, along with Moldova. But really in places like Albania and Moldova, what I loved was just that feeling that like things are getting better. Things are on the up and up. And that happens when you're coming from so far behind and you've got growth that's accelerating so fast that people see these changes in their life. When we're in a country where you've got 1% growth or 2% growth, that's nothing. Like, you don't really notice any really changes in your life quality. But when you're in a country like Vietnam or Albania or Moldova, you have 9% growth, 10% growth. The difference is, wow, before we never had a refrigerator in our house, and now we have a refrigerator. This is amazing. Like, life is good. Now we finally got a motorbike or a car. So going to places like those where you have, just like that positive mindset, everybody's really happy and optimistic for the future is nice. And it's encouraging.
One thing is that you had several things that are interesting, because you are not living in the country that you were born. You are not even living in the continent that you were born. So you are basically a person that is used to change. So one thing that I'm curious is, how did you discover your path? How you decided, oh, I want to do translation and I want to go completely abroad? How you conjugate these two things?
I kind of discovered that I like to travel first. And I thought that was amazing. And then I looked at, okay, what can I do to help me travel? And at the time, this is way back when, I was kind of thinking, okay, should I go into IT or whatever? What should I study? I was young when I started traveling. And then I realized, wait a minute, I could teach English and maybe eventually start a school. So I did my degree was a customized degree. We could do that in the US. It's really cool. We could kind of pick and choose. And we had to make a proposal. So my degree was in teaching English as a second foreign language, doing business, and French. And I studied those 3 topics, and I kind of picked my courses that I wanted and said, that's my major. with my overall plan being, one day I'm going to go out and start my own language teaching school. So that was kind of the vision of where I was going. And so I got married in France at a young age. I was 21. I met my future ex-wife when I was living in France, and we fell in love. We got married young, and I started teaching English. And it was tough and it was crazy. And we're like, okay, before we have kids, before we settle down, let's go off to Vietnam and let's try teaching over there and experience. And it was over there that I kind of realized that I didn't really like teaching English, and maybe I just needed to stick it out for a little bit longer to get to my goal of starting a business. But during that time when I was going, on that path, I'd been asked to do translation, and it was something that I really liked because I'm a very curious person. And what I love about translation is you find out about tons of stuff. It's crazy. I can tell you stories. The first thing I translated was a DVD on paragliding, which is amazing. You get to find out about how to paraglide and then go off and go paragliding. And then one day I'm translating something about, the animal trafficking in Africa and people going and killing elephants and cutting out their tusks and just terrible stuff. And I get to the end of it's a blog, and I read, and the last sentence is, "And as Miss France, I hope to draw attention to this issue throughout the world." And I just didn't even realize I was translating the blog for Miss France into English. And so you get to, do like a lot of amazing things, learn about new things. So going back to what I was talking about, when I was living in Vietnam, that's when I had that idea, that unique selling proposition, because I had some experiences with translation, and these were the things that were kind of bugging me and on my mind, it's so crazy, because my experience translating, I was asked to translate a children's book for teaching young kids in France, about France and the different regions and departments in France. And it was really kind of crazy because I wanted to teach this to English kids, but about French departments and French regions and zones. It was really strange. And so those kind of things were going around in my head. And I just decided, let's go do translation. Why not?
Because you did a kind of leap of faith, because you were heading for being a teacher, and suddenly you said, okay, I'm going for translation. And this is a kind of issue that a lot of people have. This problem is that they go for a career and they stick with that no matter what, because they decided that. So it's always complicated. So it's always interesting to get this leap of faith. Robbert, your turn.
In all those years of being an entrepreneur, totally different question. In all those years in being an entrepreneur, what has been your biggest lesson that you actually want to have 10 years earlier?
My biggest lesson as an entrepreneur has, that I would have liked to have 10 years earlier. This is a great lesson, is I went back to school in 2014-15. I did a program on translation and localization in California, excellent school, Middlebury Institute of International Studies. And I took one of the classes in particular was on sales methodology. And oh my God, it opened up my eyes to how to do sales. And I think back, this is in 2015, 10 years after I've started as an entrepreneur. Oh my God, I'm so stupid. It would have made things so much easier if I had been applying what I know right now to all of these different emails that I got over the years, and calls and leads and contacts. It was just you kind of do it by trial and error. So if anybody out there, you're thinking about starting a business, one of my mentors or colleagues who always says this quote: "There's something terrible happens in business if you don't sell." You know what that is?
Absolutely.
Absolutely nothing, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the one of the most important things. And so
unless you are a .com, then you have to sell a personality or something like that.
Yeah. Something like you, like Filipe?
No. I'm talking I'm talking about other cases that are funny that happen. Actually, some of them ended last year before the pandemic. There are interesting cases that companies that they didn't sell anything, they only sold a promise that they will sell. and their value went through the roof in terms of billions. Of course, after they went also to zero. So that was different. So, and by the way, how is it for an American to be in Europe? Do you have any kind of strange episode that you can share with us?
Are you talking about November things?
An American and
left or right, red or green, or what? Red or blue?
No, an American living in
JCI is not political, huh?
Yeah, no.
Europe.
I'm talking about adaptation to Europe or not. Maybe it was so easy. It might be a feedback that we are such easy guys to go. So
no, one thing is for sure. When you guys are both living in your native countries, but you have traveled a lot. When you are living in another country, one of the things that's really been, it's always difficult and challenging is that there's really good books that talk about this. You become part of what's called a third culture. And I don't know if you've heard about this, but basically I'll never be fully French as long as I live here. Like I'll always be seen as an outsider. And
but you go to the US and now
when I go back to the US, I'm an outsider too. They're like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? We don't do things like that. Like that's strange. And even the way you talk is weird. So you no longer belong to your home culture. You'll never fully belong to your host culture. So you're kind of in this third culture space. And you end up identifying and like making close friends with those other people who are also in that space because they can relate to you. They're not necessarily Americans. They could be from other cultures, but you have a lot in common with them because they're also struggling with this dichotomy of, their cultural identity.
So a kind of hybrid tribe.
Yeah.
The hybrids.
So that's what we navigate all the time. Where the bridges between two cultures and hopefully bringing understanding between them. And that's what I love about my business and translation. I think like ultimately it helps create more peace in the world because it helps people communicate. It helps people understand each other. And a lot of conflict comes from just misunderstandings, basically.
Interesting. Yeah.
Missed in translation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you even brought your new love with it as well, because your wife, she's from Latvia, right? So
yes, my wife is Latvian, whom I met at a JCI event in the Netherlands. Thank you guys very much for hosting that wonderful congress where I got the chance to meet my wife at an Estonian party. So there's lots of things.
2017, you mean?
Yeah, World Congress.
You didn't know.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
So we met there, and then we got engaged in Goa, India, at a World Congress at the Estonian party in Goa, India. Yeah.
There is an Estonian thing going on.
Yeah, no. There's definitely a JCI thing going on. She was a member in Latvia, and so that's great. We have a lot of shared values, and we met, and things kind of clicked, and we got. You know what our first date was to go see Kofi Annan. So we had Kofi for our first date.
That is a kind of strange first date. Normally it's like dinner and some wine because you are already drinking the wine, as I can see. So, but Kofi Annan for a first date is kind of original.
Filipe, it was a good morning, very interesting, inspirational, I remember.
Yeah. So we were like right in the front row, basically. I saved her a spot. It was,
So she was impressed because you got the first row.
You saved the spot, yeah.
We have Reynold saying bonsoir.
Bonsoir, Reynold.
That you understand French. Bonsoir,
Yes.
bon Valencian. And my French is not so good as yours. And also Ernesto, that I don't know if he's
Ernesto from Colombia, but he's Austrian, but he's
normally in Uruguay, but
in Uruguay.
In Austria. He managed to come back.
Punta d'Este. Or
Punta del Este.
Yes. Hello.
So Robbert, your turn.
So going along with JCI, because that's why we are here as well, right? Because JCI, and then you're being a little bit older, and then you can do these kind of shows. and invite people and let's talk business. And also, what did you learn from JCI, what you now are using in your business? Are there any things you learned or you experienced?
Are there any things? It's everything. Are you kidding me? Like everything I knew in like my business was like, thank you, JCI. Like if I hadn't, when I started my business, people started saying to me, I love to tell this story, go and see JCI. It's good. Like it's good for networking and you connect with people. And I kind of like, okay, yeah, I'm like, driving my car, trying to do what I'm doing. Another person tells me, and finally I see an article in the paper. Okay, fine, I pick up the phone, call, and I talk, and I get to know, okay, what it's all about. And the opportunities that I've had in JCI for training is just blown my mind. And I can't even begin to tell you all the different things that I've learned through JCI, not just through different trainings at different events, but the connections I've made.
So it's possible to say that helped you as an entrepreneur also?
It like made me a successful entrepreneur. Yes. Anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur in their life, you have to start by taking initiative. And JCI is a good place to practice taking initiative by running some projects in your local community, connecting with other people, leading them, forming a group, communicating about your project, putting together a budget. A good friend of mine told me JCI is like doing an MBA, but doing it like, and you don't have to pay for it. You do it voluntarily and you learn all sorts of things. You learn about leadership. You learn about...
Not about sales. That's one thing.
Yeah, but we did have a thing of
with sales.
We had a training on sales, but it wasn't as good as what I got when I university. And that's something actually, that's my little contribution to JCI is I've created a sales training, which is like a 3-hour session, but it's using the sales methodology, which is developed by the guys who used to sell like Xerox machines and everything. But develop like kind of take some of the elements that to membership recruitment and development in your local chapter, because it's something that's really simple to do and we just don't know how to do that. Like sometimes a chapter is lucky and they've got a really good salesperson as their president or as their person in charge of development, and easy peasy, they just grow with their membership. And other times they don't have those people. They have strengths in other areas, but they just don't know how to attract and retain members. So that's kind of what I've my little gift to JCI.
So your biggest learning in 15 years being, okay, I should have known much more about sales 10 years earlier. You're now giving back to JCI, but then using it for local chapters and regional chapters to
grow. and hopefully like they can take that and kind of adapt it to what am I doing coming up. I'm just trying to think. I'm doing the training, so I'll do the training for one of the projects that we do. Actually, one of our local chapter projects is to help young entrepreneurs who have a project that they're going to start. And they have an idea or they've already started within a certain number of months, and we get them together, about 10-15 of them, for 2 days of training. So you have different people who come and they'll give them training an hour, sometimes it's 3 hours, it depends on the theme. It'd be about marketing yourself, it'd be about vision and strategy. And so one of the sessions that I'm going to give, usually I would give like a networking session, and this year I'm going to do a session on sales. So I'm actually going to take this sales that I adapted to JCI, but just turn it around and do it for how important sales are, and how to how not to lose that contact and that lead, and convert that lead into a sale.
Wow.
Yeah, because sales training is actually very important in JCI, because you have several levels of sales. You have people that are entrepreneurs like you that need that training, people that are the officers that need to sell the organization to others, because this is something that is sometimes difficult to establish a sales point of JCI, and to get more people involved, to get more members, and sometimes even to sell ourselves as professionals. So this is something that is very relevant. John, we are reaching our time. Thank you very much. We had today John di Rico, that we just learned that he's a kind of hybrid. He's a bit of American, a bit of French, And at the same time, he's a citizen of the world because he's everywhere in the world. And again, very well known in JCI. Thank you very much, John, for your time and for your sharing with us. Robbert and I love to do this kind of Let's Talk Business because it's always an opportunity not only to share with our audience about the great people that we have in JCI, but at the same time, we have the opportunity to learn a lot. So, John, thank you very much. And I see that the sun is still in the same position behind you, exactly the same position. You have to tell me how you managed to do that. The Côte d'Azur sun is absolutely amazing.
We have a saying, the sun never sets on the cool.
Yeah, it's clear. It's bravo. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you, guys.
Oh.
And by the way, there's a special dedication to Robbert right here and to the Dutch.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much.
All right. Goodbye. Thanks, guys. It was a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you.